You know, when I introduced this resolution, I thought we would have a discussion on the resolution. When the other side introduced essentially a resolution or an amendment that would gut my resolution and tried to focus it on an entirely different set of questions, I offered a friendly amendment to say, I'm happy to include your questions because I think you have a right to those answers. I don't think there's anything there, but how do I know that unless we have those questions answered? You chose not to accept that, and so I really reject any idea that somehow we're avoiding things and you are that you want to discuss. We have agreed to include those questions in our resolution, create one resolution that answers your questions and answers my questions. I think we have a right to that. I think that's what's fair. And in the absence of doing that, what it seems to me is happening, Mr. Chairman, is that there is deliberate stonewalling that appears to be happening to stop any movement into the questions that are before us today. Very serious and grave constitutional questions. And if you look at some of the things that have been emerging, this isn't just Democrats who are saying this. It would be one thing if you could say that it was only Democrats who raise questions about the things that are happening. That is not what's happening. And I wonder if you're questioning the credibility of the Senate Judiciary Committee in raising these questions, in calling before the committee Donald Trump Jr. and Comey and all of these people to hearings in the Senate Judiciary Committee because they know that it is their responsibility to the country and to the Constitution and to our democracy to examine those questions. Because I don't think that Chairman Grassley or people in the Republicans in the Senate who are investigating this think it's ridiculous. They are investigating it because it is the responsibility to do so because increasingly troubling things are occurring. When Donald Trump Jr. has a meeting purportedly to get information provided by the Russians around the campaign and Hillary Clinton's the presidential campaign, and when following the revelation of that meeting, the president tweets his support for his son, doesn't even ask any questions, but says, this was his July 11th tweet, my son Donald will be interviewed by Sean Hannity tonight. He's a great person who loves our country. July 13th, my son Donald did a good job last night. He was open, transparent, and innocent. This is the greatest witch hunt in political history. But for the other side to imply that somehow Donald Trump Jr. is okay because he left the meeting because there was nothing worthwhile there. What does that mean? If there was information that was presented by the Russians that somehow would have been worthwhile and then he would have stayed? The reality is he should never have taken the meeting. And again, it's not just Democrats who are saying this. David French from the National Review, respected conservative, wrote an article saying, no, you don't take the meeting. You don't take the meeting. And when this committee and my friends on the other side undermine Mueller, Robert Mueller, as somehow also being partisan, I find that incredibly disrespectful to Mr. Mueller. In fact, when Mr. Mueller was selected as the independent counsel, there was wide bipartisan agreement. Mr. Mueller was the longest-serving FBI director since J. Edgar Hoover, originally an appointee of President George W. Bush in 2001. And yet now, because Mr. Mueller is uncovering things that must be investigated, like obstruction of justice by the president, all of a sudden, some of my Republican colleagues seem to be implying, and the president is certainly implying, that he doesn't need to be, that he is going to be fired from that role. And that is the problem with the special counsel role, is that it reports to the chain of command. And Representative Jason Chaffetz called Mueller a great selection with impeccable credentials. Charles Grassley said the same thing. Many Republicans have said that. So the reality is, Mr. Chairman, that I'm distressed that this committee cannot, on a bipartisan basis, agree that there are significant questions before the American people. You want to have another beating of the dead horse of Hillary Clinton and her emails? Fine, I'll include it. But let me and let us and let the American people have the opportunity to actually debate the issues that are before us today that Democrats and Republicans in the Senate have agreed are important to come before the Judiciary Committee. But this committee of the House Judiciary has yet to have a single hearing, and in fact has stripped my resolution.
Time has expired.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will yield back, but I want to say that I will introduce the resolution again because I intend to have a discussion on the resolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.